Okay, we start the Committee of the Whole meeting. We've already said the Pledge of Allegiance. We've already had a roll call.
No, this roll call has to be with the new board members. Yeah. So there will be a roll call.
So we will have a roll call.
If I could just jump in, we got feedback from the public that cannot hear us. So if you're talking, please pick up or receive a mic.
We're going to work on some mic improvement before I leave.
Roll call, Mr. Basil?
Here.
Mrs. Bites? Here. Mrs. Dungan? Here. Mrs. Hamill? Here. Mr. Evans? Here. Mr. McLaughlin?
Here.
Mr. Rath? That's good, thank you. Here?
Here.
Mrs. Twardowski? Here. And Mr. Martino?
Here. Okay, under announcements, we have two. There will be an executive session following this meeting to discuss personnel. And there's one agenda edit, and that's that under item 14, add a motion to appoint an alternate board secretary effective December 16th, 2013.
My form says December 17th.
No,
we should do it effective immediately. Sure. We can talk about that when we get there, but
okay.
I think we should just do it effective immediately.
Okay. Are there any other agenda edits?
I would like to discuss under new business proposal that I brought to Doc Broder's attention about some. I'd like to bring to the attention of the board something that I've been researching called the President's Award volunteer service or volunteerism. I've discussed it with Doc Broder. I just want the board to know a little bit about this program and I think it's valuable for the district. So I don't want to tell you now. We'll talk about it in new business.
If there's no additional agenda edits, are there any public comments on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go into the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martino. Just in general for the new board members, this may be the easiest way to break you in. This agenda should go rather quickly, although there are some important items on here. But this is typically the fashion in which we do the Committee of the Whole. So let me begin. The first thing that I have listed for you is just a general reminder of our holiday concert schedule, a chance to get out and see all our students in action in our music program. Check your local school calendar for all of the dates. They are posted, so I'm not going to bother reading them here at this point. But it's always a pleasure to go see the young musical talent that we have throughout the school district, and I'm sure as new board members and even for existing board members, it's always nice. I know the public appreciates whenever administration and the board can be present at these events. Item B, the superintendent transition process. As you know, last week the board appointed an interim superintendent who will be working with me during the month of December. She will be officially taking over for 6 months starting January 2nd. She and I have been in constant communication since her appointment. She's already been brought up to speed on certain documents, certain procedures. She and I are going to be meeting 3 to 4 days as her schedule allows. And I will try to coincide some of that with some of the board orientation that I'll be doing with the new board members as well, to have you have a chance to meet her. So I'll communicate that to you. Again, for the new board members, I do a weekly board update. That's my primary mode of communication for items like this. But again, always feel free to call me or email me with any questions you have. So that really concludes everything I have under the superintendent's report. I would add an item that's really not there. Again, it's part of the board transition process. Obviously, I have 14 days. I will do the best I can in those 14 days to bring the four of you up to speed with the things that are going to be on your plate. As Mr. Martino said, it takes time. 14 days is not going to be the end of your orientation. Your new interim superintendent or acting superintendent, which is the official title as of January 2nd, has extensive experience in orienting new board members, so you'll be in good hands once I leave as well. So that concludes my superintendent's report.
Curriculum and instruction, an update on current initiatives.
Okay, just again, this will start to fill up more as we start to have committee meetings again. Most of the time the things that come out from committee appear here on the agenda then for discussion. This, one of the things that you're going to be faced with, again, not to overload you here tonight, but The high school course selection booklet is being prepared now, and that's an important decision in terms of what we will be offering to our students for next year. Obviously, when you get into the detail of the budget and whatever budget impact, again, I would always ask you to always keep in mind how that's going to impact program and curriculum as well. So there will be a lot of budget and curriculum initiatives that get intertwined. So at this point, I don't have any specific information for you in terms of what's going on once the curriculum and instruction committee gets up and running again in the winter and in the spring. You will have plenty of agenda items here to discuss. So that concludes my report under curriculum and instruction.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to the Building and Grounds report.
Again, generally what comes out of Buildings and Grounds is what we bring from the Facilities Committee meetings on a monthly basis. That committee meets as needed. To Mr. Smith, as you know, we're very proud of his work, does a good job with providing the board with ample information about what happens in every aspect of our facilities and buildings and grounds. At this point, I don't have anything particular to report out of that committee, as it has been quiet. Again, once you establish your new facilities committee, this part of the agenda will begin to fill up again with information on buildings and grounds.
Public comment?
Told you this would be easy tonight.
Seeing none, we'll move on to item 8, Finance.
Okay, what you'll see here again for the benefit of the new board members, these, as we have real estate tax exonerations, they come to you. Those are the attachments that you see. So just to use this as a little tutorial tonight, if you ever have questions on those attachments, you can certainly wait till this meeting or call us beforehand. But they've already been vetted by the business office in general. Under finance, as far as the day-to-day stuff that you see on the agenda, that comes under the direction of Mr. Boyer at this time and will be under the direction of your future business manager. Item C is obviously an item of major import, as we have already publicly made some commentary and some initial presentation of the balanced budget that the board has asked us to put together. As Mr. Martino mentioned, we all know there's a gap again this year. We are now getting to the work process now. We know what the news is. Now it's time to start working. So what this item is here is to open it up to board discussion as to when you would like to have your budget planning meetings. Just for history sense, the board has always asked the administration, it's either usually in December or January, to hold a specific workshop for a presentation of the budget. And again, that's, as a new board, that's up to the flavor of the board as to how you'd like to approach that. My only recommendation is that you should make, it could either be at a committee of the whole or at a separate meeting. I think we owe it to the public to make sure they understand I think what we're planning to do, whether I'm the one that does it or your interim acting superintendent does it, is we have a PowerPoint presentation that we have that I think puts together all the facts and figures that I think the public needs to know initially and what we're facing. So I would open it up to how the board would like to move forward with that, even though we don't have a finance committee. Mr. Basil, as someone who was actively involved in that, maybe you want to discuss how the finance committee was thinking about that to give the rest of the board a chance to comment on what they think they want to do.
Well, I think, well, I mean, the Finance Committee is officially terminated as of December 16th when the board meets for whatever the new committee makeup will be. My recommendation would be to have a budget meeting this month. And the reason for that is I think we need to get the new board members up to speed as quickly as possible on the working documents that we have to date on the budget so that they're familiar with that. No, I'm just saying, like, I just think we need to squeeze it in between now and Christmas time. You know, it's 25 days. I understand that people are taking off for the holidays, but sometime in the next 3 weeks we should probably meet as a group and just go through this, because you guys need to get your feet wet as quickly as possible. One of the things that this board in the past has worked consistently hard on doing is bringing the budget discussion as far forward as possible, so everybody understands how it was created, what the numbers are. If you have questions about those numbers, they can be answered, so that we're not discussing whether or not we agree with what the numbers are. It's a discussion then going forward about what our choices are. And as we get new information throughout the year in January, February, March, and April, we can refine that budget process. But there's certain decisions that have to be made by the end of February. If we're talking about the elimination of sports, we're talking about the elimination of kindergarten, sports schedules have to be created for next year if those things are sticking around. Kindergarten enrollment has to go forward. So starting that process in January does not give us a lot of time to talk about the budget. So my recommendation would be to pick a date in December that works for everyone.
I agree we should meet in December, and I think at that December meeting, we should talk about how many meetings per month going forward starting in January, because there's quite a gap, and I don't want to wait until April or May to be trying to decide what we're going to do. So
if I might make a recommendation, given that, as Tamara just said, the time is tight, I'd like to throw out to the board the possibility of, since we're all going to be getting together in 2 weeks on the 16th, the agenda looks like it's going to be rather short. We could take time to have a special presentation on that evening, maybe start a half an hour early and just do it that night. The presentation itself takes 45 minutes tops. If you add in time for public comment, maybe an hour. So by 8 o'clock we could be on to our regular agenda. Based on what we see here, this isn't going to explode that much in terms of, the only thing it'll probably expand is the personnel section, given that people submit things kind of on a daily basis. But that would be my recommendation for you. I would be happy to be the one to make that presentation, even though I will be officially leaving by the end of the year. I probably have as much knowledge of it along with Mr. Boyer as anybody. So if you want me to do it, it has to be before December 20th. So
let me ask before you do that, though. You had a budget presentation at the Finance Committee meeting.
Correct.
And I think the public is pretty much aware of where the budget stands right now. I think our meeting in December, we should start working on how we close the gap, not just presenting the gap as it stands.
Well, the gap is closed.
Well, the gap's closed with eliminating all kinds of programs and raising taxes.
Well, that's what we have accomplished as a board. Was we wanted to have a balanced budget and start the discussion with a balanced budget. Now we can talk about what goes in and what comes out, what levers are we going to pull, whether it's, that's the use of fund balances in there, the cutting of programs are in there, and taxes are in there. And you don't have, and other than going back to your collective bargaining agreements and negotiating those with the other parties, there aren't any other levers to pull. So, I think the public has not had the benefit. I was at the Finance Committee meetings. We had 2 Finance Committee meetings to discuss the budget. One was a PowerPoint presentation where there was maybe, 6 people in the audience who saw the discussion, or saw the PowerPoint and saw the discussion that took place concerning the district and its taxes and things of that nature. And then we had another meeting last month where you had a larger group where we were discussing a model. But quite frankly, unless you, as a new board member, had the model in your hands and you got to see how it worked and what assumptions were being made and how you can manipulate that data, I think you're at a disadvantage to comment on what the next steps are, because it is basically based on assumptions. I think the first step would really be getting the information in the hands of the 4 new board members, and the next 2 weeks you get an opportunity to work with those numbers, ask our business manager direct questions about those numbers so you understand how the models work and what assumptions were made and why. And then at that point in time, we can have a presentation to the public that covers both of those meetings, because you're going to get an audience in here of about 450 people who are going to be seeing it and hearing it for the first time. They weren't paying attention in October, they weren't paying attention in November. They will be paying attention in December because it already has hit the papers, and there's a lot more scuttlebutt about it. People tend to be a little bit more focused as we get into December and January. That's my opinion on it after sitting through this for a few years.
Mr. Martino, to your comment about that the public has seen it, what the PowerPoint that I would would offer up is pretty much the same format that I've used the last 2 or 3 years, and it would be that, which would include that information, but it has other background information. I'd be happy to forward the last year's version of that to the new board members for you to take a look at it, and if that's what you would like to see in that format, we'll be happy to put that together. We need to know what you want so that on the 16th we come prepared to give the right information.
No, that's fine, and I'm all for giving the public as much information as possible. My point is I think we need to start thinking at least about how we don't eliminate all these programs and how we don't do the things that are included right now.
Well, that obviously, that's board discussion.
We're open to ideas. The PowerPoint that you have prepared, is it ready for public consumption? Is it something we can put on?
No, I don't have that. I don't have the 2000, I'll call it, since the budget year, I don't have the 14-15 version ready. I can show, it was a matter of public record last year. I can show you what we did last year as a template to see if that's the kind of information. I have maybe a 15-slide PowerPoint that has historical background, things that we've cut. Okay. If the rest of the board would like that, I can have that to you tomorrow.
Well, the PowerPoint that was presented at the...
That's already out there. That's already out there.
Those
right.
Cuts and the tax increases that are looking to close the gap for next year.
Right, but I meant for internal board view,
right.
The one that I presented last year, which for existing board members, you might still have it in your files, but I can certainly, it's one file. It takes me 5 minutes to find it. I could have that ready for you. As a matter of fact, we were already preliminarily proceeding with that same format in the event that this discussion went the way I think it's going to go tonight. So Mr. Boyer, you're pretty much ready to go public on the 16th, correct?
Yes.
So we just need to know if that's when you want to do it. That'll be my last chance to do it for you. That's all I can say on that one.
Yeah, I think we should meet on the 16th.
So if you're amenable to that, press is here. We can schedule you want to call it a budget meeting from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock and just move the board meeting back to 8?
Well,
or do you want to just put it in the regular agenda?
I would just put it in the regular agenda because we don't want to just sit here if the meeting only takes 30 minutes, the presentation. We would have to wait till 8 because that's the time of the meeting.
We can add it, I guess, under new business.
Can you not just advertise? Can you just not change the start time of the meeting to earlier?
Absolutely.
And then you don't have two separate.
You can add it under new business. I don't
know how everybody else is. I can do 6:30 if that makes it. I don't know. I don't know how much.
No, I think the agenda.
But I don't really. I don't miss the midnight 1 o'clock.
I'm with you. Earlier is better.
Correct. in my opinion, because.
I'll leave that up to the board. I'll be here regardless. If you tell me 5:30, I'll be here at 5:30. Doesn't matter to me.
Doctor, one thing, I believe the auditor might be making their presentation on the 16th also.
Well, we'll tell the auditor they have 15 minutes.
Okay.
They can summarize that. Board will have seen that.
I don't know how everybody else is.
I'm fine early.
Well, in light of that information on the audit report, we probably should, changing a meeting time, that's, as long as we do it in advance, we're okay. That's not an issue.
You're going to have to advertise whether it's...
Right.
I need to know tonight probably.
No, just consensus.
Consensus if people can make it.
So is there consensus around the table for a 6:30 start time on December 16th?
I'm fine with 6:30.
Okay. So be it. Any reporters out there, please help us get the word out.
6:30 voting meeting.
6:30 voting meeting, Monday, December 16th, to include report from the auditor and also administrative presentation of the 14-15 budget.
Back up 1 second, Mr. Bates will comment. So will we get a copy? I think Kim put together that PowerPoint, not the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do, we can, typically in the past what we've done as finance committee and stuff like that, we've worked closely with the budget, with the business manager to kind of put together that, the spreadsheet and the PowerPoint. There's an iterative process that goes on behind the scenes to say, okay, well, what do you guys think? How do you think the public's going to look at that and interpret that information and put it in a more intuitive way? And then we would disseminate that to the board. The board would look at that, and the board would usually typically have comments. What does this mean? What does that mean? So that the board isn't seeing this for the first time out here. It's a working document. You're entitled to look at these things and understand what it is before we discuss it. And so it gives the individual board members an opportunity to interact with the business manager at the document that you receive. So you can ask questions and get answers. We all benefit from the answers that are being, from the answers from the questions you guys are asking, because we all get more information as a result of that. And then typically at that point in time, the administration now knows, okay, we've revised this presentation in a manner that is comprehensible to the board and to the public, and then we put it out there for the public to look at and discuss and ask questions about. And as a board, we have a better opportunity to answer those questions more intelligently because we understand what the information is being presented. So
we get a copy of that.
Absolutely, we should be getting that.
It's an Excel spreadsheet, I said.
Well, yeah, we can give you anything, that you need as far as that's concerned. But as far as the last year's PowerPoint, I'll give that to you right away just so you understand what we're aiming for on the 16th.
Why don't you also have those models sent out to them, too? And they can look at ahead of time. And they might not understand all of it, or they might not.
Had you sent those out already? No.
I didn't send it to the new board
Okay.
members, but I will.
Yeah, all the
Tomorrow?
financial stuff that we've received to date, I think should go out immediately.
Yes. No, we have no qualm with that. That's what Tuesday morning brings. More work. So we'll have it ready. I will also forward to you the last year's PowerPoint so you can just see what we're preparing. We'll insert, obviously, up-to-date information, but it'll give you a 3-4 year. Every year I knock off 1 year, so in some slides there's a 3-year history, some slides there's a 5-year history, summary of some of the things we did. It's very helpful. So, are we clear with all that? All right, item D then, that's for you'll see that that's a monthly item.
I just had a question on that, actually. Mark, is there a reason why the debits and credits on those things don't balance out? Like $3,000 in maintenance
Should.
and $24.45.
Could just be an oversight. Yeah, that should be $3,000 for the.
Instead of $24.45.
Oh, that's corrected.
So we're going to correct those, Mark?
Yeah. Thank you.
That's it under finance.
You didn't touch on item D. You mentioned it.
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about. That's a monthly item that it's an attachment for your review. We legally have to have you vote on those.
Okay. Is there any public comment on the finance section? Seeing none, we'll move on to personnel.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martino. Number 9, personnel. Generally, again, for the new board members, we don't go chapter and verse here, item by item. If you would have any questions, you'll see this list expand as volunteers are approved, as people go on leave, people resign, anybody gets hired to replace someone. That all occurs under here. So beyond that for now, that'll just still be, you will see that expand. And then if you have any questions, you can either call us or ask at the public meeting, but you can assume that the paperwork's been done and everything that we need to have done for those personnel approvals has been taken care of administratively. So that's it.
Any public comment on personnel? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 10, programs.
Okay, this I want to take a little bit more time with for the benefit of usually with the old board or the former board. I would go through this rather quickly. The monthly enrollment report for the benefit of the new board members, there are 2 of them. The one that you see that is entitled monthly enrollment report form, where you see numbers. Each one of those, the other one, each one of those represents a classroom section that you see on there. These 2 numbers jibe when you take a look at them and compare them. But for example, again, for the benefit of the new board members, 5th grade at AEC, you see 25, 24, 23, 24, 24, 23. That means there are 6 sections of 5th grade at Amity Elementary Center, and that's how many students are in each section. It's a very quick way to count how many teachers are actually in that building in a given grade and in a building in total. And then the total of the building enrollment is at the end of each column, et cetera, et cetera. You see our BCT students are labeled at the bottom in the right-hand corner. And then the total district enrollment by grade sums out to the total district enrollment of 3,628. If I were to stay here, I wouldn't be going into that in-depth explanation every month, but just to give you an overview of what this form will exist upon my departure. And it's a very useful document, quite frankly, in tracking the important data of student enrollment. Now, the second one that we give you is called the Enrollment Report Comparison. That's to give you kind of a 3-month running total of where we stand. You can see our enrollment has gone down a little bit from 3641 when we opened school to 3628. It's hard to always explain away exactly why that's happening. Usually places that you look for that are lately been anybody that's been going off to cyber school, or people just move. Sometimes they'll come in, come out. So that is still representing the downward trend. A third report that the board had asked us to put together, which is new within the last calendar year, is we call it our placement report. We call it a student data report. And if you look at that it's been a very useful document, frankly. I'm glad we started to do this. But at all times, you can see, for example, we have 37 of our students in some kind of special education placements. So 180 students of ours on the right-hand side of that document are out of district. They are students that could potentially be in our school, but they are not. So our real enrollment, if you would add 180 to that, would put our real enrollment back up to almost 3,800. But 100 of those 80 kids are not here in our buildings. So our working enrollment day to day that we are dealing with and have responsibility for are those 3628. Now the special ed placements we actually do have direct responsibility for. The students who are charter school students or cyber school students that are not on our Berks Online program or the homeschooling students, we have no sway over them per se. They pretty much do what they do on a daily basis under the school code. They're allowed to be where they are as long as we account for them. We ultimately have responsibility for at least keeping records on them, but we have no administrative responsibility for them. In terms of the left-hand column, you can see the students that live in our community that attend our local private schools. And the list at the bottom, those are all of our special education and or alternative education placements. Just on a budgetary note, many of those placements cost us quite a bit of money. And secondarily to that, those are students who generally whose needs are such that we cannot handle them here. So that's maybe more than you need to know, but I'd rather you know that now and than later. So if you ever have any questions about the information that's on this report, obviously due to confidentiality, we would never post names on this kind of report. This is really just a data report to give you numbers and background on what our trends are. Any questions on any of that before I move on for the new board members? Okay, great. And finally, one thing that you will be approving, as is the board's responsibility, and we'll do that on December 16th, excuse me, is you will approve the annual meeting schedule of the board meetings. Just to give you some background before you might have any questions, the second and fourth Monday, I'm sure you knew that, is our regular meeting dates. The only thing that throws that out of kilter would be a national holiday. Usually that's in May with Memorial Day. We generally don't meet. The rest of them, I think, fall lockstep. Is that correct, Mrs. Kramer?
Yeah.
So May is your only exception in that we have back-to-back. And then in December, obviously, we have an obligation under the school code to, in the first week of December, hold the reorganization meeting. And then 2 weeks hence, we have our voting meeting in December. July is open to the board's discretion, even though no meetings are scheduled. It always becomes a question of the board if they need an emergency meeting for something or some special meeting. That's always at your discretion. But it's been this board's practice not to schedule a July meeting. That's not every board does that. Daniel Boone has done that in my 5.5 years here. So that will be up for your vote in 2 weeks. Questions?
Quick comment on that, maybe in light of what, in light of the comments, in light of the conversation you guys had about the special meeting, I'm wondering if maybe we should make our meetings at 7 o'clock instead of 7:30, if those board hearings.
That's a board discussion.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'd raise it up and see that as a discussion, and maybe we can think about that until we vote.
If you decide to do that, we would certainly want to alter this document.
No. Mr. Rathgeb, I have a couple things that I have listed that I wanted to discuss in new business, and that was one of them, to start the meetings at 7. Yeah. So it's something that I'd like to see voted on next meeting. So if everybody would think about that, if there's any
Well,
other...
we should discuss it right now. That's what this meeting's for.
Okay, you can discuss it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally the reason why we had it at 7:30 is because for some people it's difficult to get here immediately after work. I'm one of those people.
Me too.
So I perennially be showing up late to these meetings. I often don't finish work until sometime way after 6 o'clock, 6:30, 6:45. I'm usually rushing to get to a 7:30 meeting. So I would have an objection to moving it up earlier. I understand the need, and perhaps we can do that on a case-by-case basis, but as standard practice going forward, I'd certainly be showing up to a lot of meetings late.
I would have the same issue.
You too?
Yeah.
I would many times have that issue as well, because it is difficult to get here oftentimes when I'm coming here for voting meetings. But on a case-by-case basis, I think it would be appropriate to look at it. But in general, I would prefer to keep 7:30.
I think we should leave it at 7:30.
Seems like you and I were the only ones.
Just kind of advertising purposes, I can't go case to case.
Well, typically what we've done in the past is when we've had, like we just did, we lump a budget meeting in with a regular meeting, or we do a special voting meeting on an issue that may be coming up. We have occasionally pushed them earlier by a half hour or 45
I can do that,
minutes
but
if
as
we saw
far as
fit, because it was a big agenda. In terms of the budget meetings that we've scheduled in the past, a lot of times we've done them on a regular scheduled meeting because people get meetinged out if you're on lots of committees, or we've taken the finance committee meeting and we've used that as a time to have a budget meeting. We've done that a lot of times too.
Just want a little commentary as well for the public and the new board members. Every meeting, even though it's advertised, one is a committee of the whole and one is a voting meeting, the board has the right to vote anytime it comes together as a quorum. And it's been this board's practice that if there isn't an item that needs vote, it doesn't have to be advertised or a special bulletin has to go out about it. So that's something else that you might want to kick around as well. Because I know there's been some criticism of that I just want to make it known on our board calendar that it says voting meetings. The board always has the right to vote at any time it so chooses. Now, from a public relations standpoint, sometimes people might say, well, you snuck that in there on us, but in fairness, every meeting is voted, is a potential voting meeting. Because you may have an issue that comes forward that is pressing and needs to be, but oftentimes we administratively will get something to you that we need a vote on this now. We try to minimize that, and that's not unique to me, that's unique to any administration. Or something else might come up that you need to do that. This calendar preserves that, the way you vote this, preserves that right for you, which I think is an important one for you to have. It actually gives you 24 chances a year to vote rather than just 12. And I think that's an important tool for any board to have. Feel free to comment.
Mrs. Kramer mentioned that we can't really change them after, well, we can change after they've been advertised, but we advertise all at once. Do we have to advertise all meetings for the entire year at one date? Or if we do decide to move a time, would it be better maybe to just advertise half a year or a quarter of the year
I save money this way.
Okay, never mind.
The advertising is very
You don't
expensive.
have to advertise like, what, 24 hours or is it 72 hours if you're changing something?
If I'm changing something, yes, depending on a holiday like this
Right.
time.
So-
But no, I can do it, just like I'll advertise the time change for in 2 weeks. But I've been trying to lump them together to save money.
Well,
Thank you.
I think if you keep changing the time, you're going to confuse the public anyway. If you
I
say
was
some
just
are
wondering.
7, some are 7:30, and then they don't, if they're not consistent, they're not going to know when to show up. So I think the more consistent we can be, I think the better it's going to be.
And I
For
think
the public.
the record would show our committee of the whole meetings, maybe 2 or 3 times last year out of 12 of them, we might have had to vote on some things. So it's been the practice of the board not to vote that evening. But sometimes things come up that you need to act on, and I think it's important for a board to preserve its right to do that. So that'll be there on the, when you can certainly have this discussion again when it comes up for vote, but we're going to proceed according to what we've presented here. That concludes
Any
my
other discussion? Any public comment? Moving on to item 11, policy.
Just a little bit of a tutorial again for those of you that have any aspirations for wanting to be on the policy committee. When I recommended that we have a policy review committee 2 years ago, 3 years ago, policy used to come to the board kind of in a, I don't want to say haphazard, that's not the right word, but kind of on an as-needed basis. And what we've done now is we have undertaken a rather thorough and painstakingly slow, I might add, but that's just the way policy is, a review of every policy in the district. We are about, I would say, a third to a half of the way through that. So for those of you that have any aspiration for being, that is probably one of the most, finance, there's a lot to pour over. Policy, there's a lot to pour over. That's not to say other committees are not important. There's a lot of legal stuff that goes into reviewing policy that is very, very important, and it was a goal of mine. After 2 years ago, I looked at the policy book and saw dates of 1987 still stamped on policies. I said, this isn't working for me, so let's change this. So we are moving away from that, and the bulk of the 000 series, which is board policy, 100, which is instructional programs, 200 students, and we are now into the 3, 4, and 500s policies, which are 300 is administrative personnel, 400 is professional personnel, and 500 is classified personnel. So those 3 should go together rather quickly. But I can tell you, your policy book in the 600s and 700s needs some serious work. So this committee is going to have its work cut out for us for it as time goes on. Now to backtrack to this agenda. This was the last work that I was able to accomplish with the policy committee. It has been reviewed by Brian Subers, our solicitor. Your job as board members is to come forward and read them the best you can, be cognizant of what's in them. You can trust that we in the policy committee have gone over them with a fine-tooth comb. The solicitor has looked at them, and once you vote them, they become either the updated or the new policy. One of the things that we are doing is we are looking at all of them, and if we bring it, you'll see gradations on this. Sometimes you'll see policies that are here just for review. That means we've reviewed them and they don't need anything. They just need a new date to say that we looked at it again. Okay? The second level that you'll see is policies that come up for a first reading revised. That means it's an existing policy, but it's been edited. So you'll get that, and you'll see the edited. There's a lot of reading here. And then that gets crossed out. And then that goes through a 2-month process. When you vote these on the 16th, these will officially go into the books as newly edited policies based on what it says that it covers. They're vitally important, because at the end of the day, when you get into these discussions about what is and what should be, what shouldn't be, the legal place that happens is in your job descriptions, in your guidelines, in your policies, and in your contracts. If you can't point to a place where it's written, you should find the place where it's written, or you shouldn't be doing it. So that's the importance of policy, guidelines, contracts, and policies. I think I might have repeated myself there, but this is an important section. It will, depending on, sometimes we'll have a policy committee meeting and we only might get through 4 policies because they're so long and tedious that it takes the time necessary. But I think for the new board members, failure to have sound policy is going to put you in some tight spots. So that was my philosophy from day one, to make sure that the policy review was done and put you on good legal ground for all of the decisions that you have to make. So the 6 that you see here, they're just policy 302 in particular, the employment of a superintendent. Act 82 of 2012 changed the terrain for what boards can do and can't do with the hiring of a superintendent. You will have to pay attention to that when you hire your new superintendent. So this policy is going to be very important for you. It's not a dramatic change, but there are some significant substantive changes that you should take a look at. What you see in there in terms of policy, we never give you anything that doesn't have legal standing. So there are certain parts of policy that are discretionary for you, and there are certain parts of policy where you're just saying, okay, this is what the school code says, so this is what we need to do. And when you sit in policy committee, that's the kind of discussion we have. For the members that are here, that I know Mr. Basil's been an integral part of that committee, Mr. Kurtz is a former chair, feel free to comment. I don't want to...
Yeah, the committee does very important work. It is at times tedious because you get a 100-page document of policy that you're expected to read through and find any issues that you might have with the policy, or just look over the changes that have been made by the administration. It's an important job, and I think the board puts a lot of trust in the committee to make sure it's coming back with positive recommendations. But if anybody's interested in that stuff, it really is a good way to see how the district runs. Because the policy, because the policy does set the direction for the district.
I have 2 questions about that. So right now, the policies that we have published are a combination of those that have been recently revised and some that are outdated. What's the oldest policy that needs to be looked at in this upper number range that we haven't gotten to?
I can't honestly answer that. I'd have to research that for you, and I'd be happy to give you an exact answer. My guess is somewhere in the 1980s.
I'm questioning whether we should be doing them in numerical order, or if we should jump ahead to the 600 and 700s if you're saying you refer to this as needing work. Some of them do, and some of them don't. What we've tried to do is use a systematic way of... there was a flow that you had by going through all of these. I don't think there's, in some respects, especially the 3, 4, and 5. Now the 600s, you could, to be honest with you, we did not have. I'll give you a case in point to answer your question. The district was absent a real solid records management policy. Well, that wasn't a 00, it wasn't a 100, it wasn't a 200, it was an 800. So we did it, and that's what I meant to say when, if we see something that's so out of kilter. And Mr. Kurtz, you can speak to this. We don't worry about the number. We're going through a sequential process to make sure that we cover everything. But if there are certain policies that need to be looked at that are so far out of I'm going to say compliance is maybe a strong word, but they're not representing the reality of what we're doing now, then they can certainly be moved around at any point. You don't have to go in a numerical way. But that was one example. If you remember when we did the anti-bullying policy, that we had that big incident and we decided to go back and do it. We were only in the 100s then, but then we jumped ahead. So the policy committee and the board obviously reserves the right to say we need that policy looked at now.
I believe when we began the process of reviewing, we did look at some of the ones that needed immediate attention.
Absolutely.
That was probably 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago at this point. So there shouldn't be too many issues like that. Of course, if you see something, please bring it up, and we can look at it, we can fast track it.
I think that, and just to give you a little bit of a background, once you pass the 3, 4, and 5s, which are personnel policies, your 600 are your finance policies, your 700s are your, and it's slipping my mind with the 700s, 800s are general programs, and 900 are community policies like fundraising and
how you make communications with the media. There's a lot of discretionary, and the 900 then is the last series. It's slipping my mind what the 700 is. If someone could look at the website, it probably has but they're all out there. Every one of our policies, no matter how old they are, they're all posted. So if anyone has an interest in that, and you have a legal type mind and really get into that, that would be a good committee for you.
What's your best projection, Dr. Otto, of how long that will take to complete that project?
2 more years?
It's hard to say, because if you get hung up on I think the finance...
You're only meeting like maybe 9 times out of the year, because we didn't have a policy committee meeting this month. Did we have one last month? I can't even remember.
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, we did. That's why these are here, these second readings.
We'll do something in January, but in the summer you're not meeting. You'll miss one of those meetings, and inevitably something comes up. So you're probably taking a look at 9, 10 meetings tops, and you're only getting through sometimes you get through a lot. There's things you're just deleting, others change, but you still have to read them. And you still have to review them. And you still have, we're still talking about them. And others, the volunteer group policy that we're working on right now. My gosh, we've spent 3 meetings on that. So.
And the volunteer policy is not. That's out of sequence. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up. That's out of sequence. I came to the board, and there were certain board members with the old board that we had recognized that there were some, and I want to use the word issues as positive. There were some issues with what was happening with the sports boosters and the music boosters, and a lot of miscommunication and a lot of issues around where was the money going and who was handling it. And for both sides to be able to have some insulation from any negativity, we said, well, we need a policy. Then we can say, here, it's written right here, this is what we should be doing. So to answer your question, I wouldn't want to pin the board to a time and say, I think it's going to take the time that it takes. And that's just an honest answer. I would say, if your term's 4 years, it'll be done before your term's up.
But not before 2 years is your best.
Maybe we'll get lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not a possibility. But one of the things that, and I think the board, a number of years ago, I presented the board with, there were ways to do this. We could either do it in-house, or we could have sent this over to PSBA, who has a policy service. $15,000. They'd come in, they'd do your whole book, they'd hand you the book, and then you'd have to read it again anyway. My feeling was that I believe that the board needed to be educated as much as the administration on the policy, so that they understand, when you talk about mandates, how our hands are tied by a lot of things. And policy is the way you find that out. And they said, well, why are you doing that? Well, because we create a position according to Policy 301. This is the way we operate here. You don't have those rules and guidelines, it literally can create mayhem. So, to the board's credit, they have been very diligent about making sure this committee continues. It's an ad hoc committee. They could just say, never mind. And then we could go back to doing policy the old way we did it, kind of when we felt like it. I don't think that's a good way to go. That was a lot for me.
Any other comments?
Sorry about that. I'm using this as a little sorry, everyone. I'm trying to bring the new board members up to speed.
Any public comment on policy? Hearing none, we'll move on to transportation.
I have no report.
No report on transportation.
On anything left for the rest of the evening, so I'll turn it back to you if you have anything, or board members.
Any old business?
None from the administration.
Well, I have a couple things. I'd like to discuss no action being taken on moving the admin offices to the APC or anywhere until we have more information. I've heard it's going to cost nothing to move to the APC, but I know it's going to cost something. I'd like to see a cost comparison between moving to the 2 facilities. I think we need that before we can make a legitimate decision on where or when.
Well, when is definitely this year, because our lease expires this year.
The end of July, right? End of June?
June 30th.
So, okay, so we know when. The question becomes where, and I think I'd like to see the cost. I'd also like, if there's no objection, I'd like Ms. Duncan works in real estate, and the question has been raised a couple of times from the public. Have we ever contacted a realtor? I'd like to see Ms. Duncan contact a commercial realtor to see the possibility of selling or leasing the facility, what they think we could get for it, and what it would take to do it.
I think that should be taken up by the facilities committee. We don't do things really individually around here. We do them as a group, and typically their committees are the ones that handle that work. So, my recommendation would be, you have the facilities committee interview several different commercial brokers and get their thoughts on market value by providing CMAs and past sales and how our building compares to other similar buildings in the marketplace. And they do a presentation in the public where that information is readily available, and then that information can be brought up. That information can be brought up to the board as a whole at a committee meeting where a broker can be chosen. I mean, you're talking about a legally binding contract that, I engage in these all the time with the commercial and industrial buildings that we own. And there's a lot of detail in there in terms of compensation and responsibilities and terms that need to be hashed out, and you need to pick your broker carefully. So I don't think that's a job for one person. No disrespect to Ms. Duncan. I'd actually encouraged her to participate in the facilities committee given her background, but I just think that there's, we don't operate individually, we operate as a group, and our committees are that tool to get that work done.
Well, that's fine. I would just like to see the facilities committee consider that, because months have passed and we don't have an actual market value of the building.
Well, you can look at the market value. I don't believe that the market value is going to be what was put into it. I mean, and I think that's got. I mean, I think that's why I wasn't here when the board started doing what they did. I was involved in the River Rock lease, but realistically, $9 million was dumped into that building 4 years ago, and you're not going to be able to get that out of it. So,
I agree with you.
Even if you sell it, if you sell it for $2-3 million, you're still paying on the debt service. So, and then what happens if 5 years from now, 6 years from now, we need a school? I'm not saying by looking at the projections we won't, but I think there's more involved in it than just looking to see if we can sell it. So, the facilities committee wants to look at that next year, and also the move. I don't have an issue with looking at the cost for the admin move, but I don't want to table this to a point where we can't get this done in time to release.
I would just also, given that the prior board had given the direction to us to move ahead, if that's the direction the board's going, we're going to need, I'm going to be leaving here, but you're going to have some administrators behind me that are going to be wondering what we're doing. They were thinking we were moving to the APC facility, so if there's going to be some change in that change needs to happen very quickly, so we know what direction to point administratively.
Well, I think that
On behalf of Buildings and Grounds for Kenny Smith, I know that 6 months will not be enough time for him to transform the space that he would have to make available at the high school and to properly get the Matthew Brook building ready for it to be painted and everything else that we have to do in order to be able to move out. I do know that will be a huge issue for Kenny at this point, at this late date. So you would have to either make a decision that we would extend some lead time at Matthew Brook in order for him to be able to complete the building of what he needed to do structurally within the high school.
I would think then the sooner that he gives us that cost comparison, the sooner we can make a final decision.
Let me just ask a question. I'm just trying to figure out, other than understanding what the cost is, the board already determined just 2 months ago that the cost to move the APC was $0. And so the cost to move the high school was X, which is in excess of $0. And if we're trying to balance the budget and come up with other ways of finding funds to do that. What's the objection of moving to APC, if only for a year? If it could be move from APC to some other place sometime later. I'm just trying to figure out what is the objection and why the push to go to the high school, where it's going to cost us more money than moving to APC.
I have two objections. One, Mr. Radowski talked about selling, and I said selling or leasing. And I think that building, for the money we put into it, needs to generate revenue. And I've heard the argument that, well, we could always move again, and that to me doesn't make a lot of sense of moving again. I mean, if we're going to wind up someplace else to be sooner or later, then why not do it to begin with? I think the building being empty, other than what's already been leased to River Rock, is more conducive to somebody else leasing it.
Well, I sit on the facilities committee, and I agree with Mrs. Torsha that Ken Smith will have an extremely difficult time in getting it done in a proper amount of time that we need. Ken and I had talked about it, and he said there would be no way he could do that by, June.
Yeah, I think
plus,
I'm sorry.
No, plus when we looked into the cost of it, you're looking at $100,000 or more to go to the high school, if that's where you're wanting to go. Whereas APC, there would be nothing, everything's there already. You just move it directly in. And if the building is full or empty, to me, when you sell a building anyway or show a building, it always shows a little bit better when you have someone in there. I mean, if we can say, here's what you can put in this building, here's how you can do it. If need be, we can move, but we need to be here for X amount of months so we can move on. I mean, but to take $100,000 right off and stick it in the high school, I don't think that's...
If APC is ready to move into, which I do understand it's easier to move there than the high school, then if the board decides that we're going to move to APC and it's ready to be moved into, I don't see a problem with changing the time frame because we'll be able to move there anyway. I think it makes sense to look at the numbers. And if we decide that it is infeasible or impossible to move to the high school, APC will still be the choice and it will be an option, and it won't take as long to move into it if it's all set up already or close to being set up.
I don't think anyone's objection to them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's a gap that we need to make sure that we're understanding. Once we move, he has to redo the Matthew Brook building. That's the time period I think we may be underestimating.
Also, the improvements to the high school, because I think is the time constraint that we're working with. There's a lot of work that has to go into the high school in order to move the administrative offices there, and you got to get that done in less than 6 months.
I walked the buildings with Dr. Otto and Ken and Mrs. Torchia, and there was an overall plan laid out that Ken did a very nice job with the transition to go there for the costs of their sunken costs, right? They're going to be what his workforce is doing that particular days of moving. So that's the reason for the zero cost. It's his workforce doing that with no additional movers or other support. It's $85,000 or more to either continue a lease or move out. I don't understand why we would change direction at this point. I agree with exploring future options if that's necessary, but we've chosen a direction, and I suggest we keep going with it.
Well, I wasn't even considering extending the lease at Matthew Brook, but here's my concern about the numbers. I hear to the APC is zero, but when I walked through the facility with Dr. Otto and Ken Smith, he was talking about installing a folding metal gate down one of the hallways. So that's not a zero cost. We have to purchase the gate. We have to install it. I don't know what other costs there are, but I don't believe...
The metal gate was for River Rock, and River Rock is incurring the cost for that improvement.
That's not what I heard that night, but that may be.
I think the question is, are the numbers available to us?
Absolutely, they're available. I guess what I'm trying to get is...
I've heard 3 different prices, numbers now for the movement to the high school. And I'm just wondering, has Mr. Smith documented that somewhere? Is that available for us?
$85,000 is not amount of money for the high school. That's what, if we would either choose to try to extend the lease, or when we move, That's the $85,000.
Sorry, the build out in the high school will be approximately $100,000. The build out, he still
I
has.
thought I heard 65,000 at one point. Now I'm hearing 100,000. I was just wondering if it's documented somewhere. Or
It is.
Are these just numbers?
Ken has done an excellent job.
I think we should get those numbers as soon as possible.
But originally, I think it's.
That's what I'm asking for.
Until we see the numbers.
If those numbers exist, I'd like to see them.
What's the
There's
harm
nothing
in
on
that?
the table at this point because the decision's been made. So if you want to table it, you need to make a motion to stop that move, and then the motion has to pass.
Was there a formal vote on moving? I don't think there was a formal vote. I think it was a consensus thing. So really, I'd like to know, was there a vote to move? I don't know who would know that.
I don't think there was.
I thought we
Well,
gave,
then if it wasn't, then I guess you would just need a consensus of 5. But you actually need to make some type of statement. It can't just be.
there was a vote to tell Mr. Smith to move forward. I
Would-
know that.
Okay.
But I'd have to look at what.
And if the concern is that our own forces can't get it done in 6 months, there's companies that will do the work for us. So we can always get it. We can always get a quote and look at those numbers too. But it's just going to increase your cost. But
I just don't understand the value added of delaying.
I'm not saying I do. I'm just saying
Yeah.
if our own force can't get it done, you have the option of paying somebody else to do it.
But if the numbers exist and you can get them to us before the next meeting, I don't see where anything would be
I
delayed.
don't have the numbers, but I'm sure somebody has the numbers.
Has there been an analysis done on leasing the building with just River Rock? I think you said River Rock, I think River Rock is supposed to take 1/3 of the building. And with the administrative, it's, whatever, 5/8 because they only take so much more. Has there been an analysis? I'm interested in seeing if there's been analysis on the lease potential without the administration moving in there. Somebody would be willing to take rent the whole 2/3 that's left. We might be leaving some
Well, I think what's going to happen.
money on the table.
This is the way I see it. I mean, this board made a decision, 2 decisions. One was to put River Rock in place, and the other was to move the administration in there. And the net of those decisions was like $330,000 to the good on our budget. Okay? And you can look at it as a long-term decision or a short-term decision. You can look at it as a short-term decision in the sense that River Rock's lease can be canceled within 6 months' notice. As of January 1st or December 31st, we can call River Rock up and say, we have another tenant that's going to move into this space, and they're going to pay us more money than you are. It's been nice knowing you. Good luck. Okay? And that's an option that's available to this board any time up till December 31st. All right? The other option is you can say, well, look, other than the manpower and labor that's involved to move us from point A to point B, which is our own cost, and it doesn't matter whether you're going to a high school or you're going to APC, it's relatively the same to move files from one building to the next. That cost is going to be the same no matter where you go. And so we're going to incur those labor hours, which we're paying for anyways. It's not like we're asking people to work overtime, to move us into the APC. And we've saved ourselves $85,000 in the cost in terms of a lease, and we had a cost avoidance of whatever it was, $100,000 in terms of improvements to the high school. So net, in the short term, I think it's a smarter decision to make to do what we've set in place because A, we're generating $200,000 in revenue from River Rock, and B, we've offset our costs by about 180 or 100 something, but it's better than zero, okay? And the cost of the alternative, and you can still go out and say, well, look, we're going to bring in a realtor, we're going to hire a realtor to market the building and see if we can't drum up business for that. And you can lease the space, you can put the space on market for the entire building. No one's saying you have to lease it for the upstairs or 2/3 or 3/4. We can lease 100% of that space. Anybody who's going to come in there is going to probably want to, if they want to lease the entire space, it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to negotiate that lease anyways. And so you're just going to have to have a deadline and say, look, if any negotiation we do has to be done and settled on and signed and sealed prior to December 31st, 2014. Right? So
I'm just
in the
seeing
short
it as
term, I
2
think it
moves
works
instead
for
of
us.
one. I'm just seeing it as 2 moves instead of one.
But
because there is a cost associated. Even though Mr. Smith is saying it's zero, it's really not zero because there's work that they're not doing to move the administrators into there. That work is backing up.
Okay, so
there is a cost associated with it.
And the only cost associated with moving a second time is if and only if you get a lease for that building. right? It's other than River Rock. And I can tell you, this is what I do for a living. I think we'll be waiting a long time for that lease. We can market the heck out of it, but I've got buildings all over southeastern Pennsylvania.
Through committees.
Huh?
But we do things through committees.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's why I'm not the one who's making that final decision. We're having a conversation as a group about that. Okay? But I think by the time you get a CBRE and you know, a Weichert and other folks in to provide you with their background, and if you're going to sit there and say, well, wait a minute, what's the value of the building if you want to sell it? Well, that requires an appraisal. That's a different matter altogether. And you're going to hire a certified appraisal to do that, and that's going to cost the school district money. And that we have to determine, is that money we want to spend? So you're going to get bids for an appraisal, you're going to talk to several different appraisal companies, and then you get an appraisal done. Now you say, okay, well, this is what the building's worth. I'm not sure what we do with that information, other than you have that in your pocket in case you do try to sell it, and somebody comes to you and says, well, we're going to give you, I don't know what it is, $2 million, and the appraisal says it's worth $3 million. So I look at this and I'm thinking to myself, well, yes, absolutely, everybody should have the information on what the cost is to move into an alternative site other than APC, because that's really what we're talking about, whether it's the high school or some other building. We can go lease space somewhere else if we wanted to. But there's going to be a cost to that which I think is greater than moving to APC. And when we're sitting here and we're looking at budgets where we're going to be cutting program, personally, I'd rather see the money going to SAVE program than to spend it on making improvements to a building that we didn't have to. I mean, that's my position on it.
I think at this point what we want are just numbers. I don't think we're making a decision. We just want to see them. So if we could just agree to get the numbers to the new members and the continuing members, I think we can move on to another item. That's just my view. I don't think we're going to make a decision on this tonight, and we shouldn't until we have the numbers.
Folks, has Mr. Martino, have you talked to Ken Smith yet or reached out to Ken regarding this issue? Because he would have the numbers.
No, but I'd like the numbers supplied to all the new members, and Mr. Smith works for Dr. Otto, so...
The numbers aren't an issue. We can get that for you. That's easy.
It's just a matter of probably getting hold of
Numbers are easy. I mean, I don't want to cloud the conversation, but the numbers are what they're going to be.
Yeah.
There's no hidden information here.
That's what I'm asking
We
for.
just send the numbers out.
I mean, I just want to make that clear. There's no veiled information here. That number can be put in any format that you want it, and we can get it to you. I don't think it changes the course of the decision that you have to make.
Well, but since there, from what everybody says, a sense of urgency on making the decision.
Well, the urgency grows out of the fact that from the direction that we got, the administration started making some physically planning to do some things. If that gets stopped in its tracks, that's a major problem.
The decision's been made.
I think you proceed until another vote says that you don't. That'll be mine.
I agree.
Could I just, I was kind of surprised with bringing my name up as far as the real estate situation was concerned. I mean, I'm in residential real estate. I do very little bit of commercial. But I do know that time is money. And if decisions have been made, it seems to me that my thought on the whole thing to begin with was, why should we pay Matthew Brew when we have room? And if we can't get out there and they start tacking extra money on, that's money spent that we shouldn't have to spend. So it does seem to me that if the decision's been made, the thing that we should do now is figure out how we can market what's left of the building. And maybe then, for what's left of the building, get a commercial realtor in there to see if we can get that rented. Does that make sense? I mean, I just think what's left over should be marketed.
I think that's exactly what the board was, its intent was from day one, yeah.
With the realization, the whole building's available.
Yeah, because actually you're saying that River Rock has, we have a lease with...
We have a 3-year lease with them, but it has a 6-month termination notice. So they can give us notice or we can give them notice, but it has to happen before the December 31st because they are their school.
Yeah,
so they have to plan for enrollment.
They have their plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how much?
Correct.
So I think the only thing left to do with the realtor is to find out what we can market the empty space for.
We've never been opposed to that. We have encourage that once
Yeah.
we're settled in, if there's more space, then that space can be marketed. We wanted that to happen.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that I didn't have any input on this ahead of time, so.
I just want to make it clear, one of the things that we will share with you, and you'll see it as part of the budget presentation because I've had Mr. Boyer put in, is the money we're going to realize from what we're already doing with APC, and it's significant. Mr. Basil alluded to it. There's significant cost savings with the plan that we have now in place for APC. When I say significant, it's not $50,000. You can talk about how much it's going to cost. If Mr. Smith has to move us, yes, that's a hidden cost. But he's going to have to move us from point A to point B or point A to point C. Either way, there's a hidden cost there. It's got nothing to do with whether we go to APC or not. If we have to move, let's just say, hypothetically, the board said, that's it, you're going to the high school. We still have to pay Kenny Smith's workers to move us to the high school. So no matter where we're going, there's a hidden cost for the workers there. So that's a given. So when I share the numbers with you, I want you to look closely at as well as the money that we're representing that we're going to be able to save or show budget reductions as a result of placing our students right here at River Rock and saving $20,000 per student and the money that we expect to save as a result of not having to bus kids all the way out to State Hill Road.
I don't think this is a discussion about River Rock. River Rock.
Well, no, but I'm saying it actually is part of the whole APC picture. You can't separate it from it when you talk about the dollars and cents involved with APC.
But my question is about the administrative offices. Simply, if the numbers are available and you give them to us,
that's not a problem.
Never
said that.
And I'd like it on the agenda for discussion and a vote next meeting if we have the numbers in time. And
well, that I need more clarity on about what we're voting on.
We voted to move them there. What are we voting on?
I understand that, Mr. McLaughlin, but I do believe that decisions that have not actually taken place can be changed. Is that not correct?
Well, I'm just asking. I'm trying to understand what rock we're bringing. What vote do you want?
I want to vote on where the administrative offices go.
That vote is done.
And I'm saying I'd like to reopen it.
Okay.
And can we move forward with getting the marketability studies done, the leasing options, for 2/3 of the building?
Facilities.
Is that in process? Because Mrs. Hamel said when they get settled, we were going to do that. What's the hold up on that? Why can't we just do that now?
Well, this board, out of consideration to the new board members coming in, has sort of deferred some of these decisions so you guys can participate in this conversation. I mean, we're already seeing resistance from, decisions that the board had already made, and people wanted to unwind those things. We kind of tabled some issues this fall because we knew a brand new board was coming in, and you get 4, potentially 5 new people that would be sitting here. So, we were trying to work collaboratively with the people that are going to be sitting in these seats so that you weren't boxed into certain decisions ahead of time that were long-term. I mean, all of us that are currently sitting here, and you guys as well, are going to have to wrestle with some things that prior board decisions had made that are going to last us for decades, right? Every decision that we've made is you can terminate in 6 months.
And I certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, well, that's what we were trying to do. So it wasn't like we're, not interested in pursuing that, but we were certainly saying, well, look, let's make the decisions we can make that are going to realize us some savings and some revenues, and let's get everybody on board so we can all agree on a path going forward. So, I would say as soon as the facilities committee is formulated, the first thing they could do is talk to, 5 different commercial realtors that understand that product type and this area, and get them in for interviews, because you're really going to want to spend some time interviewing the brokers that are going to be marketing the product and how they're going to do it. And I think if you're looking for a determination of value, they're not there to give you a determination of value. They can give you, I think they're going to have a difficult time, but they can try to give you cap rates and things of that nature for that type of use. It's a very special use. It's a school building. And so you have a very limited number of people that can use that building as it's currently designed. Somebody else may want to come in there and do something different with it, which would require all kinds of improvements to the building. And there's a cost to that. Who's paying for those improvements? Us, them? Those are the types of things we have to discuss. So.
I just would like to let the new board members know.
Mary Beth, come to the microphone, please.
There is no elevator in that building. So I don't know if that poses a problem in getting to the second floor without an elevator. I know that we would not be able to occupy that second floor in order to accommodate anybody that is currently using an elevator to get in and out of our building. So when we were planning on moving in there, we were only occupying the bottom floor into the last elevator.
Thank you, Mrs. Kushner.
Any further discussion on the administrative?
I do want to pause a minute here. If there's an expectation that has to come for, I mean, it's going to be my last meeting, but if there's an expectation of some kind of, I'm going to need some direction from this board as to what needs to get put on the agenda, or someone's going to have to bring it from the floor.
Yeah. Well, since I'm the only one that has not commented, I think on this real brief, there's a time issue. If we're going to go to the high school, I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think we should just move forward with what is happening at ATC. Once the facilities committee is reconstituted, then they can discuss getting evaluations for leasing or for sales. That's going to take a process of a couple of months, I'm sure. So by the time we get back to making a decision on ATC versus the high school, I think it'll be too late. I think we need to have the administration go forward now with ATC, and if down the road it is feasible to change, that's over there.
Well, we're not voting, but is that the consensus?
I think that is, there's no harm in continuing to go that track. But we do, there's no harm in looking at that, and if it is a very low or zero cost, then there's no problem going ahead with it because it could be changed in the future if need be. But we do need the numbers, and the new members do too, and there's no objection to that from what I hear. So I think
my comment is the numbers are, as far as I see, the numbers are not going to change the decision to move.
Yeah.
The numbers could project what future we choose to do with the building. But the move is what I was concentrating on and focusing on the efforts that are going into that now. I don't see a value in those changing. And I think there's future opportunities to give the facilities committee to investigate. But I mean, to me, I guess I'm missing, this one is written out so clearly as far as savings and no spend and the value added in doing it. I'm not seeing why you put the brakes on.
I think that's what I was saying. I think the consensus of the board is that we need to continue with that because it seems like that is the consensus after listening to the discussion.
I think once, like Mr. Basil said, once the committee is put back in, the committee's made up again of new board members, they can pursue whatever they want, but I just don't see how you can stop things now unless you have a great suggestion like bingo and you can fix it. Because we spent a year trying to fix it, and that year's almost done. So unless you have like a great idea and can save us money, then next meeting sounds great. But other than that, until the committee's reestablished, I don't see why we should stop what we worked on for almost a year.
Well, the consensus seems to be just that, but I'd still like to see the numbers, Dr. Otto.
That's not a problem. The numbers, again, just to repeat, that's not a problem whatsoever. Be happy to provide that.
Thank you. Also, under old business, this is another decision that has already, I believe, been made, but I'd like to discuss, and that's block scheduling.
I don't think the board made a decision on that. There was a recommendation. I don't even know if a recommendation was brought forth, but there was never a formal vote to move forward with that. Isn't that correct?
No, we're still waiting on information.
Yes.
We can talk about curriculum and instruction, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Mr. Martino, that's still at the discussion level.
Okay, that's great. All right, thank you. Any other old business? Any new business?
I had mentioned, should we go to it first?
Ms. Hamill had an alternate secretary.
Right, I needed to make a motion to appoint an alternate board secretary effective immediately for times that I'm not available. So I was wanting someone to appoint someone that if I'm not here, they can sit here and do the notes and assist Sandy, or Sandy assists them as need be.
Are you looking for a vote on that tonight, or are you going to wait till the 16th?
I think state code requires that, does it not? I mean, we kind of looked at that, so I don't know why we never had that before, but
okay. So are we looking to vote that tonight,
Yeah,
or?
we need to nominate somebody for that post, and then they need to be voted in as the alternate.
Just need to ask for nomination.
Are there nominations for an alternate secretary?
I'll nominate Mrs. Bites. I think it's an excellent nomination.
Second.
I'll make a motion to close the
I
nomination.
You gotta respectfully decline. Oh.
Why not?
Maybe next year.
Okay.
So are there any other nominations?
Somebody that holds on to position.
Well, there can't be another officer.
So
Right. I'll do it.
I'll nominate Mr. Basil.
I'll second.
So it's seconded by, motion made by Ms. Twardowski and seconded by Mr. McLaughlin.
Do you roll call, or can you say all in favor?
We have to close nomination. Do we have to close nomination?
I guess we can.
I'll make a motion to close nominations.
Close nomination.
I'll second that.
Very Robert's rules here
I think we
tonight.
do it all in favor.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
I'm getting
very
used to
much.
this.
Mr.
I'm
Basil?
getting used to this. Just when I'm leaving, I'm
Thank you,
getting used
Mr.
to
Basil,
this.
for being the alternate.
My pleasure, anytime. I'd like to make a nomination for the alternate.
There's a certain rhythm you get into when you do this all the time.
Is there no other new business?
Mr. Kurtz had something.
I had something. I discussed this with Dr. Otto informally. There's a program that's run by the 1,000 Points of Light Foundation. Now it's a big thing under George H.W. Bush back in the 80s. And it's a thing called the President's Award for Volunteer Service. And how it works, different bodies can be certified at no cost to be groups that give this award. And I was thinking it would be a great thing for Daniel Boone to be certified. Then if volunteers, all volunteers in the district, if they so choose, they could log their hours, and we could present them with this award if they would like to. No cost to the district, and bring it to the attention of the board, and ask the administration to look into that.
I think it's an excellent idea.
I agree.
So noted.
Any other comment, questions? Any other new business? Presentation by the public.
We start out by first congratulating the new officers, the new folks sitting up there on the side. Having said that, as a member of the committee that recommended the decision to move the administration into APC, I find it troubling that we're going back over this all the same information. This was discussed in public many times. The numbers were run many times. We talked about all our options, which there are three. We can rent a new space. We can, or stay in the existing space. We can move to the high school, or we can move to APC. Those were really the viable options that were left to us. And when we started going and evaluating the different options, one of the things, the high school was obviously a choice that we had. And when we got to actually look at the space that we're talking about and finding out the details of the cost and the effort involved in transforming that space into usable space for the administration to move in, there became obvious that the cost involved to do that, plus the fact that if you're familiar with this space, if Dr. Otto was taking you through the high school or haven't yet, I invite you to ask when you get to this point to see where these offices are. And one thing that became apparent to me during our visit in our Buildings and Grounds Committee was this space is in a common hallway with the students. So that means you're going to have members of the public entering the building and mixing with the student population unfettered. You can't block off. There's a I think it's between the C and D block of or B and C block of the high school. There are about 75 or 100 school lockers there. As I understood it and how it was presented to us, locker spaces that are premium in the high school. I think the administration could probably attest to that. How are we going to recover that space? There's classrooms that are still in use.
across the hall from this administration area that you possibly would create. How are you going to keep members of the public out of the student area? Well, we're going to have to hire somebody, another security guard, to sit at that door, let people in, walk them to where they need to go, and have them escorted out. Additional cost, in addition to cameras, an audio system upgrade. Okay? We didn't even get that far because we could obviously tell that moving over to the APC in the space that we're talking about was the least desirable space. The least desirable space is left on that first floor. That became the easiest, obvious choice. And it was our recommendation after a lot of discussion, a lot of input. We've had members of the public come forward. We got all the numbers. And I agree. You should, as new board members, be asking these questions and getting those numbers. But Mr. Smith has a very small group of people to work with. And I can tell you he's a really good planner. And he asked for a decision from us a month or two ago because he's going to start this project, start working on it in 3 weeks' time. He also has large bathroom renovations going on in the high school. And then he also has to work on the Matthew Grove building when we start vacating that. So he has a very small group, and if the change would be made at this rate, 12 and a half hours, it's going to be very detrimental. And there isn't really a cost for an employee you already are paying. These are already on the salary, you're paying the salary, you're paying the benefits for these people. The district vehicles are being used, which are already being paid for from the district. So there's no additional cost other than I think the network has to be divided to keep the network for the administration area separate from the River Rock area. But I would caution you at this point, at this late juncture, please don't reverse that because it will create a very big hardship for Mr. Smith and his group. I think it would be very wise at this time.
Thank you.
Shane Cockrell, 830 Gavin Calendar. I'd also like to make a few comments on the building, the APC building. If we ever have a growth in our school district and we need to build another building, it's going to cost $15 to $30 million to build a new building. We have one right there. We already paid for it. The reason why we have so much debt is because of building the buildings and building the athletic field, the stadium, everything else. The second biggest thing next to salaries in our budget is $7 million. $7 million every year goes to our debt service. If you I did some math back here. It would take, if that's assessed at $1 million, in 100 years, you will collect $1 million of tax revenue. If it's assessed at $2 million, that's $6 million. If it's $3 million, that's $9 million. That's what we put into that building. So I would like you to save the money and getting an expert in here to find out what the building is worth because it's ours. It's the taxpayers. We own it. We should keep it. We should try to get revenue for it. But we shouldn't sell it. I was at the Finance Committee meeting during that presentation, and I don't believe the numbers of families that are moving out. We have a development in Newton Township. It's building. They just built their first house. They're going to keep building, adding new houses every month. If the economy comes back, there's growth, students come in, and we have to sell a building, and now have to build a new one. We're going to have to buy land, and we're going to have to borrow another $50
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
To announce the executive session.